All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to something I haven't done before, but I think is going to be incredibly interesting. This is fixing the Power Rangers RPG. Now, some of you may be wondering, what do you mean for fixing it? I thought you said it was a good book and you should buy it. It 100% is. I absolutely think the Essence 20 system in general is a really, really solid, well-designed system. I am really, really interesting in interested in running games using it. However, one of my big critiques of the Power Rangers RPG, if you watch my review, is that the roles, basically the equivalent of classes in the Power Rangers RPG, are tied to colors. Now, as I mentioned in my initial review, there's actually some support to that idea in the actual Power Rangers canon. The idea that Rangers that are certain Ranger colors happen to share certain characteristics, like the Red Ranger is always the leader for the most part. There are some outliers here and there, but that tends to be how it works. Or the Blue Ranger tends to be the kind of brainy, scientific one. So I understand the process. I understand the thought process behind it. I don't think it works in the system that they designed. So, what I'm going to be doing in just 2 videos, because this is not going to be massive rocket science. This isn't going to be me changing any sort of mechanics or anything. I think the Power Rangers RPG would work significantly better if the color of your Ranger suit was not tied to your role, and instead, just like the Transformers RPG, it was tied to your origin, which still kind of fits the idea that certain characteristics make you more likely to be a ranger of a certain color, but it doesn't limit you anywhere near as much as the system currently does, where basically if you want to play the Power Rangers RPG right now, you have to have a Black Ranger, a Blue Ranger, a Red Ranger, a Pink Ranger, and a Yellow Ranger, possibly also having a Green Ranger. But the Green Ranger themselves is kind of built to be a 6th Ranger. It does not really give you the ability to create your own Power Rangers team. It gives you the ability to create the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. But if I'm going to be running a Power Rangers RPG, I want to be able to create my own team, and I want my players to be able to play the color that they want and not have the color that they're playing define how the character itself plays. So, that being said, this first video, I am going to effectively just be renaming the roles. That's all I'm doing. Not changing any mechanics. I'm not saying that anything, any ability scores should be different or any essence scores. Nothing like that. All I'm doing is replacing the color with a different name, and I'll explain why I chose each name and why I think it fits really well. The second video that I'll be doing will be talking about the origins, and instead of each origin being tied to just one color, I'm going to be giving every origin, except for one, is actually going to be tied to at least 2 different colors. And those are going to be just suggestions. But I think the system itself works significantly better that way. And again, it allows for the players to really feel like they're able to make their own really cool character. It also means that you can have purple rangers and orange rangers and gold rangers and things like that, and not have to wait for a supplement to come out to let you play the ranger color that you want. So, that being said, let's jump into this by talking about the Black Ranger. The Black Ranger in the Power Rangers RPG is... I'm going to get my drink real quick. I always got to have my drink. The Black Ranger in the Power Rangers RPG is very much based on Zack, the Black Ranger. A little bit of Adam is in there, but this one really feels very Zack focused, especially if especially if you know how Zack kind of worked with the team. The description that they give, and this is where I kind of come up with the name from, right at the top, I think really kind of clarifies the Black Ranger really well. Rangers that are imbued with the black energy of the morphing grid tend to be social charmers, entertainers, and the real life of the party. They're the personification of team unity, and a lot of what they do helps keep the bonds between the members strong and tight. Black Rangers are equally adept at fighting back to back with their friends, showing that the team comes first and always ready to stand up for any part of it. That does describe Zack pretty well. It describes a lot of different Black Rangers. This is over the years. But the idea of the social charmers, the entertainers, the life of the party, that one specifically feels really, really heavily influenced by Zack, who was... Zack himself was a dancer. He actually had his own style of martial arts that he practiced that they made up for the show. It's not a real thing, but it would be really cool if it was, called Hip Hop Keto. And Walter Emmanuel Jones, who is the actor that played Zack, actually has talked a few times. The shooting schedule in general was really, really rough on the actors, and a lot of times fight scenes and things like that were choreographed on site right before they shot them. And so a lot of times what happened with Walter Emmanuel Jones is when they first started, they had, their fight director and he would go, you do this and you do this, you do this. And as all the actors got more comfortable, they would do things like Walter go, okay, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to kind of, spin over here and I'm going to dance over here and I want you here and I want you. And they kind of directed themselves a little bit as the seasons went on. And one of the things that he got to do is he just got to do these cool kind of dance moves and put in martial arts into the dance. It was really fun. The thing that I really want to focus on, and this actually comes from my own experiences in leadership and team makeup and things like that, because those are really, really important things in management in general, and just anytime you're dealing with a lot of people in a group setting. I myself tend to be a natural leader, so knowing stuff like this. And so the idea of they're the personification of team unity. They're effectively the glue that holds the team together. I threw around a bunch of different names for this particular role, but they all kind of fit around the idea of, well, what keeps everything together? What keeps everything stable? And the name that I eventually decided felt the best for the Black Ranger role is the anchor. And that's how all of these are going to be. They're going to be the and then a single word. I think that makes them the most generic so that you can add your own flavor to it, which I think is really, really important in an RPG. Nobody wants to have a character made for them that they then just have to kind of play. In a tabletop RPG, you want to build your own character. So there needs to be a little bit of vagueness to anything. And I think the anchor fits really well. The anchor is what holds the team down. An anchor is literally that. You drop anchor and it keeps the ship from going too far away from where it's supposed to be. The anchor anchors the team together. It holds them together. It gives them a place to fall back on, a place of central stability. And I think that fills the idea of the Black Ranger really well. Another thing that they mention at the bottom is that Black Rangers also tend to be second in command very often, and that is another thing that is really, really important in group makeup in general. Is the person that kind of holds the team together sometimes can be the leader, but a lot of times the leader can't be in that position of being the glue that keeps the team together. Because they have other things that they need to focus on. But the person that the leader relies on most in the group tends to be the anchor. And I have filled both of those roles before. And it is extremely difficult to find a leader that can also be an anchor at the same time. So I think it just fits really, really well with the idea of what the Black Ranger represents. If you look at the actual things and features of the class itself, like one of the things they can do, you got this. They're a very kind of bard style character where they're constantly helping other Rangers into the things like that. And that all kind of feeds into the idea of the anchor. They're there to kind of support everyone and keep everyone together. So. Moving on. I have to move some windows around. All right. The next role, the Blue Ranger. The Blue Ranger was really, really simple to pick the name for. First things first, let's read the little description of what the Blue Ranger is to kind of give us a better idea of what they were going for it. Those chosen to embody the energy of the Blue Ranger will be the closest member of the team to the inner workings of the morphing grid itself. Candidates for becoming a Blue Ranger are selected for their brains far more than their fighting skills, choosing to use the morphing grid's many facets to design all of the tools, technology, special equipment the team might need. If it runs on the power within the grid, the Blue Ranger is likely to be the one to decipher, understand, and ultimately help the team wield it against the forces of evil. And again, if you look at history, again, Blue Ranger specifically, this is based on Billy, who stayed with Power Rangers all the way up through most of Zeo. I believe in Zeo was when he finally he left the show, but that was 4 seasons that he was there, and for 3 of those seasons he was the Blue Ranger, and he tended to be the Brainiac, so much so that for Zyuranger, which was the Super Sentai series that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers took their footage from and the things like that, the Blue Ranger in Zyuranger actually wasn't the Brainiac. The Blue Ranger was actually the comic relief a lot of times. But because of how the character was portrayed in America in Power Rangers, and how David Yost played him, and how they eventually had to ask the Super Sentai guys to film more stuff in the suits because they ran out of footage after effectively the first season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. When they filmed more more suit footage for Power Rangers, they started making the Blue Ranger significantly more into the Brainiac, and the kind of comic relief started falling a little bit more on the Black Ranger. So that being said, the subtitle of the second paragraph is Teen Technician, and I really have a hard time coming up with a better term for this role than the Technician. It fits really, really well with what they're trying to do here. Now, it's not 100% true that all Blue Rangers are the kind of tech guys, especially if you start going into later seasons. If you go like Power Rangers Dino Charge, Koda was the Blue Ranger, and he was technically because he was the character was a caveman that was trapped in ice for a few million years and then brought to the present. He technically was quote unquote dumber than the rest of the team, and he filled a little bit more of kind of the heart of the team. Or if you go the next season, Ninja Steel, the Blue Ranger was much closer to the comic relief in that, with Preston being a magician and his magic not always working and things like that. So does the Blue Ranger 100% always have to be a technician? No, there are quite a few other versions of the Blue Ranger. If you look at the Ninja Storm Rangers, the Blue Ranger is the I can't remember her name, but it's the first female Blue Ranger. And she is not really considered a massive brain, if I remember correctly. I actually don't know that season very well. If I'm talking out of my ass here, go ahead and tell me in the comments down below. But anyway, so I think for the role itself, the technician, there tends to be someone that is very technical savvy on the team other times. So calling the Blue Ranger the technician, I think, just fits a lot better. And it does fit the abilities that the role is built around. So yeah, moving on. The next Ranger, the Green Ranger. Again, Green Ranger is 100% based on Tommy, and Tommy himself was a bit of an outlier because he was a 6th Ranger. Green Rangers show up in later seasons. In both Zeo and Turbo, they had Green Rangers that were part of the core group, and they 100% did not fill the role that Tommy did before. If we read the actual paragraph that introduces the Green Ranger, possessing a rare wavelength of energy within the morphing grid, Green Rangers are the loners and the outsiders. They join with Ranger teams when they can, but still tend to work on the outside of operations and do so in a way to maintain the sanctity of the team concept. Green Rangers are ready for anything, whether they line up as part of a team or if they stand alone against the forces of evil. So again, very, very much built around the idea of being alone or being a 6th Ranger kind of thing. However, when we look at other Green Rangers, and I mentioned this in my review, if you look at Adam, who is a Green Ranger twice in Zeo and in Turbo, Green Ranger just as often tends to lean more into the comic relief style character. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Black Ranger and the Green Ranger tend to be the kind of interchangeable Rangers. If you have a Black Ranger as a main member of the team, you're generally not, or core member of the team, you're generally not going to have a Green Ranger, and vice versa. It's the reason why Adam went from being the Black Mighty Morphin Power Ranger to the Green Zeo Ranger and the Green Turbo Ranger. It's the reason why, I can't remember his name, in Megaforce and Super Megaforce, the Black Ranger, when they went Super Megaforce, turned into the Green Super Megaforce Ranger. And they never really acknowledged that. Now, does that mean that only Tommy was the Lone Ranger? No. If you look at Ninja Storm, the Samurai Ranger, which was their version of the Green Ranger, Cameron, very much still fit into that kind of loner that kind of goes off and does things on their own. However, he was also a 6th Ranger. And so generally, if you're going to have that kind of, loner style thing, it's going to be more of a 6th Ranger thing than specifically linked to the green color itself. If you look at most 6th Rangers, they're going to have similar things that they do. If you look at the Gold Ranger from Zeo, again, very much outsider. He shows up when he's needed and then goes away. The same is true about both the Phantom Ranger and the Blue Centurion from Turbo. Kind of felt that same thing where they would fight on their own and then they would come in and help the Rangers when they needed. It's kind of a Sixth Ranger style thing. So instead of being called the Green Ranger, we're going to call it the Outsider. And I, again, pulled that directly from the text here. Green Rangers are the loners and the outsiders. I thought about calling it the loner, but the loner doesn't really fit with the idea that Power Rangers is kind of built on, which is, separate individuals being brought together to form a team. A loner is always going to be fighting against this, whereas the outsider is someone that quite literally is that. They are from outside the core team, and their character growth is going to be based on the idea of dealing with the fact that they weren't a part of the core group for some reason or another. If you look at the Power Rangers 2017 reboot for the film, which is not nearly as bad as people made it out to be, but it was not a great movie. The idea of the outsider is kind of built into every one of their characters, but I think it is most it is kind of most exemplified by the character of Trini in that, who even when they're first, diving down and everything like that, has to kind of be tricked into going down into the pool and eventually getting the powers like she. And when you start learning about her backstory and how she feels as a part of her own family, she feels like an outsider in her own family and thing like that idea can still make a really good team dynamic, but it turns into a really interesting dynamic for the character to deal with. And again, when we look at the mechanics of the class itself, it is really built around the idea that it is self-sufficient. Like Solo Strike, their first level ability is 100% designed to be, I'm going to fight over here while you guys all fight over here. So I think the outsider fits really well for that. Moving on. The next Ranger, the Pink Ranger. Now, the interesting thing about the Pink Ranger, I guess we should start with the actual text, because it does give a good idea of what they were thinking about when they built the role itself. Infused with one of the supporting energies in the spectrum, Pink Rangers are warriors that specialize in backing up their teams from the rear ranks. They are archers, snipers, and markspeople of the highest caliber. While a Pink Ranger is on the team, the rest of their allies can always fight confidently, knowing that a grid-enhanced sharpshooter is watching their back. Again, this is 100% built around the idea of Kimberly the Pink Ranger. She literally was a sharpshooter. She had a bow that she used. But if you actually look at Pink Rangers throughout Power Rangers, they very, very often have some kind of ranged weapon. If you look at Power Rangers in Space, for a reason I have never quite been able to understand 100%, she had basically a satellite dish that she could shoot people with. Obviously, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, she had the bow. If you look at SPD, I mean, technically they all had guns. If I remember correctly, Megaforce, she had a good gun again. Like, it's really, really common to give the Pink Ranger a ranged weapon. And if you look at the actual mechanics of it, it is built around, like, you could very easily call the Pink Ranger just the Ranger. It really, really feels very similar to the D&D Ranger. So What are we going to call this role? Well, it's not the ranger. We're going to call the Pink Ranger the sharpshooter. Again, taken directly out of the text, and I think it fits the best. Like, you could call them archers, snipers, things like that, but that tends to kind of pigeonhole you into a very specific thing. Like, if you call this role the archer, well, then people are going to expect you to always use a bow. Whereas a sharpshooter can use a bow. A sharpshooter can use some sort of a firearm. Really, any kind of ranged weapon can be attributed to a sharpshooter. And I think it fits with so many of the Pink Rangers in general. I also like the idea of the Pink Ranger role, or the sharpshooters are going to call them now, the sharpshooter being a quote-unquote support class, because they stay back and support their team. A lot of people don't consider a character like a ranger or an arcane archer or something like that in more kind of fantasy-based RPGs as a support character. They consider them a damage dealer. But if you actually look at how real combat works and the things like that, someone that can see the battlefield because they're very far away and then can influence it because they're using a weapon that has a larger range than anyone else on the team can be an amazing support character. They can be a battlefield commander if they want. So I really do like that, and I think the sharpshooter just fits what the role does really well. So moving on. The next role, the Red Ranger. I'm just going to start with the text because we all know where this is going. Born leaders and warriors through and through, candidates chosen to embody the noble spirit and fighting prowess that each Red Ranger uses to stand proud and strong in the front lines of their Ranger teams. They are fearless fighters that show their teammates how to defend the morphing grid personally. Ready with their fists, their blades, and an inspiring show of leadership, Red Rangers are almost always the center of any team. Almost always the center of any team conflicts, inspiring others to stand proud and so the same. I believe that may have been mistyped somehow because that was a weird sentence to read. Anyway, Red Rangers. Red Ranger is, like I said, almost always the leader. The only time I can think off the top of my head where the Red Ranger was not the leader is technically Time Force. The Pink Ranger was the leader, and the Red Ranger technically filled the role of the everyman, because the other Time Force Rangers were all from the future, and they were all part of Time Force, and they were all trained in things. And the Red Ranger was just a dude from the present, so he acted as the audience stand-in, but still displayed a lot of leadership qualities because that's what the Red Ranger does. And I don't think it's really hard to predict what I'm going to call this one. I am specifically calling the Red Ranger the leader. And 100%, I think the best kind of justification for calling it the leader, as opposed to any other name, and we'll talk about another name that I'm going to use for a different river role in a little bit. But their second level ability is called Follow Me. And it literally is just when you are rolling in an initiative, any one of the Rangers can decide to instead of rolling their own initiative, they can just be 1d4 lower than whatever the Red Rangers is. And any Ranger that decides to use Follow Me when they're rolling initiative actually gives the Red Ranger a +1 bump to whatever they roll. So if you get all 4 Rangers going using Follow Me, that means the Red Ranger is rolling initiative and then adding 4 to it. So that 100% feels like a very leader thing to me. Again, in my professional life, when I had a professional life, when I could still work, I was put into leadership positions constantly. I was a manager, but before becoming a manager at any of the jobs I was at, I was very often considered a team leader in some way, shape, or form. In high school and middle school and things like that, I was very regularly the leader of the section that I was in the things like in band. I was the section leader. Literally every year I was in except for my freshman year of high school, because I was a freshman and you don't have freshmen leading a senior band. I was the section leader of generally the low brass, because I played tenor sax, and tenor sax don't get to be with the alto saxophones, who get to be over by like the trumpets and the clarinets, and they get to do cool stuff. No, the tenor saxes sit back with the bones, the euphoniums, and the tubas, and we are the low brass. And so yeah, I was section leader. I was I in marching band. I was the section leader. In choir, I was section leader of the basses, and then became section leader of the baritones. I have been in leadership positions very, very often, and knowing how to be a leader is significantly different than having the title leader, or having something that gives you a some sort of rank that gives you a leader. It's really, really common to see new managers who don't understand how leadership works, to make massive mistakes, and then end up actually losing members of their team, but because they don't want to work for someone that's not going to be a leader, they're going to be a manager. I don't know who said this, but it's 100% true. People don't quit jobs; they quit managers, it is a very, very true thing. A bad manager, even a low ranking where they really don't have that much authority, a bad manager can close a business so much faster than literally any thing else. You can get around. You can deal with theft. You can deal with bad employees. You can deal with a bad market. You can deal with regulatory practices that are killing your business. All those things can be dealt with. You can't deal with a bad manager. You either have to turn them into a good manager, or you need to fire them. So, the idea of the Red Ranger being a leader, and then again, that follow me aspect of, hey, listen, I'm going to be someone that you can rely on so much that you don't even have to roll your initiative. You can just trust me. And when you put that trust in me, you help me do my job. That is 100% how leadership works. So calling the Red Ranger role the leader, I think, just exemplifies how the entire role works. So yeah. Moving on. The next role, the Yellow Ranger. This one I had the most difficulty. A lot of it because the description that they give for the Yellow Ranger is really good, and it actually describes a lot of different Yellow Rangers pretty well. However, when you try to marry it to the mechanics of the class, that's where things kind of start going wrong. The Yellow Ranger, in and of itself, I like the Yellow Ranger role because it's a monk. Like 100%, that's what it is. It's super fast. They can get extra attacks. Like, it's built around that idea. But if you actually read how they describe it, well, here, let's read the first paragraph. Chosen for their understanding of the arts, both creative and martial, candidates to accept the power of the Yellow Ranger should be clever, witty, and full of originality. They are fast thinkers, and just as fast on their feet, able to judge where best to apply their skills and get there quickly to do so. The yellow energy of the spectrum chooses those with adaptable minds and agile hands to wield its power. Yellow Rangers are not the hammer in the toolbox, they're the paintbrush. Instead of applying a direct single solution that may pass or fail in one fell swoop, a Yellow Ranger is drawn to using many smaller applications of their skills to build up to a more certain solution. So when you look at that, and that really does describe the Yellow Ranger pretty well. Trini, the first Yellow Ranger, was a really, really interesting character. She kind of felt she kind of filled the role of the ethical center of the team. She very, very often would be the one to bring up the idea of right and wrong, even though all of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was all about we always do the right thing. Trini very much felt like the heart of the team, and a lot of the struggles that she had to deal with her kind of dealing with her own empathy, with her own past and the things like that, and how she felt and how she fit into the team itself. She was a very emotional character, not emotional in the idea of that her emotions controlled her, or she acted because of her emotions. No, she was a very emotional character because she used emotion very often to fuel her actions, which sounds like a contradiction, but let me explain. She actively delved into her own emotional certainty and her own feelings in that, and used that to fuel the actions that she takes. So it wasn't that the emotions themselves were causing her to do things. She would decide to do things and then dip into her emotional reservoir to do them. So coming up with a name that fits that, I couldn't come up with something. Now, again, if you actually look at the mechanics, they're fast, like triple strike attacks. They can make more attacks. Again, very monk-like. Nimble fighter. When they hit something, they can move extra. They're very, very fast. Everything around the mechanics of the class is built around it being fast. And again, because we are taking out the color and letting that sit in the origin, we don't really need to worry so much about the kind of motivation, because that's going to be provided by your origin. We can actually just focus on the mechanics. And so I'm not 100% happy with this name. If you have a better name that gives a similar feeling, let me know in the comments down below. But the name that I have decided for the Yellow Ranger role is the Speedster. I tried to kick around a lot of different things. Like, I thought about calling it the Monk, but I'm like, no, let's stay away from Dungeons and Dragons things. I thought about calling it like the Master, because that is another thing that has kind of been used interchangeably with the idea of the Monk. If you look at the old Final Fantasy games, like the original Final Fantasy, the Monk eventually gets upgraded into the I believe here it was called the Black Belt, but depending on the translation that you were looking at, it was also sometimes referred to as the Master. And so I thought the idea of, well, we could call it the Master because it kind of does fit that idea of them being the paintbrush and things like that. However, when you look at the mechanics, it just doesn't feel right to call it a Master. Everything about this role is built around speed and precision. And so it just felt better to have something that referenced speed. And I tossed around a lot of different, like, what is it? Celerity, I think, is one of the words that works with speed and things like. I tossed around a bunch of different words to try and come up with a single word that would define something that was a very fast character. And Speedster is the one that just feels the best. But it doesn't feel good, if that makes sense. So I am 100% open to calling this literally anything else, but it needs to have something to do with speed and precision and the things like that. So for right now, we're calling the Yellow Ranger the Speedster. Moving on. The final role is part of the Advanced Ranger Spectrum. And this was another thing that I was less than thrilled about because um, the final role is the White Ranger. And because of the role it filled on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which, funny enough, was not the role that it filled in Dairanger, which is what the costume was from. Season 2, all the Thunderzords and things like that, all those are from Dairanger. In Dairanger, the theme around Dairanger, it was actually based around Kung Fu. It's a really, really cool season, but you actually never see anything other than the White Ranger's costume in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers because they decided to keep, instead of giving them new costumes and things like that, which they would eventually do when they did Zeo and then Turbo and things like that, they decided that no, we're going to stick with the costumes you already had, but they had no more Green Ranger footage, mostly because the Green Ranger died in Zyuranger. So they needed, and they didn't have a green Zord to give him. They had a white Zord, and so they needed to introduce a White Ranger so that it would make sense, and so they made the White Ranger. Now, the interesting thing about it was the White Ranger in Dairanger was called the Kiba Ranger, and the Kiba Ranger was a kid. He was basically the Justin. If you remember Power Rangers Turbo, he was the Justin character, which is why a lot of times when you see the White Ranger in costume, when they're using the Dairanger footage, you see him like jumping around and being really, really kind of expressive because he's a child. He's a child that's super excited that he's a Power Ranger. It's a really, really cool dynamic. Anyway, so because of that, the White Ranger filled the leadership role in seasons 2, 3, like Tommy became the leader as soon as he was introduced in the White Ranger. Because of that, the White Ranger actually shares a lot of abilities with the Red Ranger. Like their second level ability is Follow Me. It is the identical ability to the Red Ranger. And they have a few others that they share. I don't think they're 100% the exact same, but they're remarkably similar. So because of that, it just I was not particularly fond of it because having both a White Ranger and a Red Ranger on this same team was going to cause issues because a lot of their abilities overlap. Now, the thing with the Power Rangers RPG in general is it is very, very much effectively feat focused. And by what I mean by that is you get general perks and you get grid powers and then Zord perks. Compared to other systems like the Transformers RPG, yes, you do get perks in that, but they're not quite as defining of the character as your subclasses in that. Whereas this, your perks are really going to differentiate it. So it's not so bad that they do share things. As long as they pick different perks, it's not going to be a really big issue. But again, the White Ranger themselves is still going to be kind of that leader position. We already have the leader, so we need a way to kind of differentiate this. The actual text for the White Ranger, like the wavelength of light itself that it represents, the white energy of the morphing grid is like the raw energy pouring into the prism to be split into the necessary parts for the team to be at its best. There doesn't always have to be a White Ranger on a Power Rangers team, but it goes without saying that the teams that can draw on the pure and just power of their energy are some of the strongest the morphing grid has ever known. They are like a two-sided coin. On one side, you have a strong and valiant little leader, but on the other, you have a noble warrior capable of standing against evil on its own. So again, it's very much kind of based on the Tommy version of it. And again, because the White Ranger suit was from a different season of Super Sentai, he was on his own quite often because they couldn't show him interacting with other Rangers because the other Rangers would be wearing the wrong suits. And Dairanger was one that got rid of the Black Ranger and had a Green Ranger instead. That's why the Lion Thunderzord has so much green in it, despite the fact that it belongs to the Black Ranger. And again, that would have caused issues if the Dragon Ranger now had a lion. So the White Ranger, their kind of big defining thing is they have their grid relic weapon. They have effectively a sentient weapon. They model it after Saba, which I think is really, really interesting, but it does make it a little bit overpowered. That's why they call it the Advanced Spectrum. This is the one that I'm the least happy with. But as far as a name for it, because it still shares some aspects of the kind of leadership role, but it does take a much more kind of it does take kind of a more separate up approach, whereas the leader is leading the team on the ground. They're right there, they're in with the team. This role is a little bit more further removed. They give commands and things like that, and they can fight with the team, but they tend to be a little bit on their own, and they lead the team more similar to kind of like a general or something like that, where they're not right next to them, but they are still fighting with them. So, the name that I've given this role is the Commander. Again, I think that it fits really well with the mechanics. Again, they can still do the follow me aspect, but they also have the things like inspiration. By taking a free action to say something positive and uplifting to a member of the team, that member may add a D4. Basically, they can use a free action, which again, I hate the word free action, but they can take a free action to basically boost up one of their allies, which again can be a very leader thing. That's a very important part of leadership is being able to acknowledge the members of your team that are doing well and to inspire them and things like that. It's a very leadership thing, but it tends to be done by someone that's a little bit further back than someone that's down in the trenches. One of the first bits of management training I got from my manager, who barely trained me at all, and he was not a great manager, but this was actually good advice, is the idea that as a manager, as you go up kind of the management ladders, because I got brought in as an entry-level manager. I was the lowest ranking manager. I was just a team leader was effectively what I was. But I still had management powers. They still gave me keys and things like that. The way that it worked was basically every time you went up kind of a step on the ladder, your head would get slightly higher to kind of observe things. So your kind of base level manager is going to be right there in the thick of things and working with people. But as you get to maybe an ASM position where they're not going to be on the cash register, they're not going to be on the sales floor anywhere near as much. They're going to be taking a little bit step back so they can observe the larger picture. Then you go to the store manager. They're a little bit further back than that, where instead of interacting with every single employee, they tend to interact mostly with the management staff, and they see things from a little larger picture. And I think that is where the idea of the commander really fits well with this. The commander is not the same as the leader, where the leader is right there fighting neck and neck with their allies. The commander is going to fight with them. They're going to be slightly more removed from it so they can see a larger picture and be a little bit more effective in their command aspect of it, as opposed to the leader who is there to be bringing the team together and pushing them forward. The commander is looking at the slightly larger picture and ensuring that the decisions that they make are getting the correct response that the whole team needs. So yes. So that is my idea for changing this up. So, final thoughts. Like I said, I really like the Essence to 20 system. I think It is wonderful, and I'm actually planning on running a very short campaign. I'll be announcing more on Wednesday. Tune into twitch.tv/trainer Jody on Wednesday nights to see me run my game, but I'll also be making an announcement then. But like I said, overall, I really like the system. I think it's a good system. I hate the fact that they tied basically your class is your Power Ranger color. I just don't think that fits. I understand the thought process behind it. I think it was a bad decision. It doesn't mean I think they're bad people. I've interacted with some of them. They're wonderful, amazing people, and they made an amazing product. And they continue to release really great products. I just think this was a miss. And so again, none of this involves changing anything other than text. None of this requires playtesting. None of this requires rebalancing because it doesn't change how the game plays. It just changes effectively what we call it. And I think that is probably the best solution to this. Again, I don't think the roles are bad. I don't think they're poorly designed or anything like that. I think they're poorly named. And a lot of my problems with the SS20 system, the few that I have, are about naming. Free Action is a bad name. Just by changing the name, I think this works significantly better. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on. All those are super important. In the comments down below, like I said, come up with a better name for the Yellow Ranger. Right now, it's the Speedster. Come up with a better name than the Speedster. That being said, this last part, I wanted to put this last part on completely separate from the rest of the video because I don't feel comfortable talking about this as a part of the video itself or saying like, subscribe after this. It just feels disingenuous. I've been planning this video for weeks, if not months at this point. But we got the news... at the time of recording this, we got the news last night that Jason David Frank, the actor who portrayed Tommy Oliver, who was the original Green Ranger and then became the White Ranger, and then became the Red Zeo Ranger, the Red Turbo Ranger, and then eventually became the Black Dino Ranger. He has been a force in the Power Rangers community since its inception. He is unfortunately passed away. Officially, a cause of death has not been released as of the recording of this video, but it has been confirmed, I believe, by his publicist or someone involved with his team that he has very much passed away. I have mentioned before what a profound impact Power Rangers itself had on me personally growing up, and as an adult, it has been a huge part of my life that I've been able to kind of reconnect with. It has, especially in my adult life, it has taught me to stop limiting myself by what I'm supposed to do. I stopped watching Power Rangers because I was too old to watch Power Rangers. Power Rangers is for kids and for babies. And then I became an adult and realized that I just like Power Rangers. And so I started watching it again. I started getting into it again. And yeah, it's a show that's designed for kids, but there's some amazing stuff that's built into it. And it is acting and it is storytelling, and those are huge parts of my life. And Jason David Frank was one of the reasons that I stuck with it as long as I did. He inspired me to become a martial artist. He inspired me to become a leader. He inspired me to become the person that I am today. A lot of people are going to say a lot of different things about him. I think the vast majority are going to be good. Some people are going to say bad things about him. I never met the gentleman, and for the rest of my life, it's probably going to be one of the biggest regrets I have. Whatever your opinions of him, he inspired a generation of kids, multiple generations. He was an amazing person that I looked up to for so much of my life, and the fact that he's gone now is horrible, and the world is significantly worse without him here. There are theories going around and there's rumors going around about his cause of death. I'm not going to talk about that. But I want to kind of end this video with the idea of Jason David Frank never knew I existed. We never spoke. We never tweeted. I never sent him a fan letter. Nothing. There's nothing in the world that would have let him have any clue whatsoever that I existed on the planet Earth, and anywhere, anytime, that was at the same time that he existed on this planet. But he changed my life, and he never meant to. Nothing he did had any motivation behind doing something for me personally. He didn't know I exist. But he made me into the person that I am today. And I'm not super happy with aspects of my life. I don't like my disabilities. I don't like how much pain I'm in all the time. But the person that I am, the actual core of my being, I'm incredibly proud to be the person that I am. And part of that person was forged by Jason David Frank. So understand this. You will never know the lives that you impact and the lives that you change. Do everything you can to ensure that those you impact are impacted positively, that the lives that you change are changed for the better. Because I know for me and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of other people out there, Jason David Frank changed our lives for the better. And when I'm finally gone, I don't think there could be a better thing said about me than that the people who I affected, the people whom my life connected in some way, shape, or form, were better off because of what I did. And I 100% believe that the world was better off because of the things that Jason David Frank did. So it was trending on Twitter for a little bit, and I think it's a weird phrase, but it feels right to me. Instead of rest in peace, people were saying rest in power. Once a ranger, always a ranger, and may the power protect you.